Deep beneath the English countryside in 1943, a group of engineers were working on a machine so revolutionary and so secret that even most military commanders didn't know it existed. This wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It couldn't fire a shot or drop a bomb, but it would prove more valuable than entire divisions of tanks. This was Colossus, the world's first programmable electronic digital computer, and it was being built for one purpose: to break the Nazis' most sophisticated encryption system. The story begins with a problem that seemed impossible to solve. The Germans had developed a cipher machine called the Lorenz, used exclusively for the highest-level military communications between Hitler and his generals. Unlike the more famous Enigma machine, which the British had already learned to crack, the Lorenz was far more complex. It used 12 rotating wheels instead of Enigma's 3 or 4, generating encryption patterns so intricate that manual code breaking would take months for a single message. By the time you decoded it, the information would be worthless. The British codebreakers at Bletchley Park knew they needed something unprecedented. A young engineer named Tommy Flowers, who worked for the British Post Office, proposed building an electronic machine using vacuum tubes. His colleagues thought he was mad. Vacuum tubes were notoriously unreliable, and Flowers was proposing to use over 1,500 of them. Conventional wisdom said such a machine would break down constantly and would never work. But Flowers had studied vacuum tube reliability and knew something others didn't: tubes failed most often when being turned on and off. If you kept them running continuously, they were surprisingly stable. Tommy Flowers assembled a small team and began construction of Colossus in total secrecy at the Post Office Research Station in Dollis Hill, London. The scale of what they were attempting was staggering. No electronic computer had ever been built before. Every component had to be designed from scratch, every circuit tested and retested. They were inventing an entirely new field of technology while bombs fell on London. The machine they created was enormous, roughly the size of a large room, containing 1,500 vacuum tubes in its first version and later expanded to 2,400 tubes in improved models. These tubes acted as high-speed switches, performing logical operations at speeds impossible for mechanical systems. Colossus could process 5,000 characters per second, a speed that seemed almost magical to those who witnessed it. The input came from punched paper tape, which was threaded through optical readers. The machine would analyze the patterns in intercepted German messages, testing billions of possible settings to find the correct decryption key. What made Colossus truly revolutionary wasn't just its speed but its programmability. Using a plug board and switches, operators could reconfigure the machine for different tasks, making it adaptable to different types of German encryption. This concept of a programmable computer would later become the foundation of all modern computing. The first Colossus became operational in December 1943, and it worked. The engineers and codebreakers at Bletchley Park could hardly believe it. Messages that would have taken weeks to decode manually were now being cracked in hours. By 1944, 10 Colossus machines were operating around the clock, providing Allied commanders with invaluable intelligence about German military plans and movements. While British engineers were creating Colossus, German engineers were working on secret machines of their own, projects so advanced they seemed like science fiction. In underground factories carved into mountains, using slave labor from concentration camps, they were building the world's first operational jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me 262. The concept of jet propulsion had been around since the 1930s, but turning theory into a combat-ready aircraft presented enormous challenges. Traditional propeller-driven planes were approaching their maximum possible speeds, limited by the efficiency of propellers and piston engines. Jets promised to break through these barriers. The Me 262 was powered by two Junkers Jumo 004 turbojet engines, each producing 1,980 pounds of thrust. These engines were themselves masterpieces of desperate engineering. Germany was running short of strategic metals like nickel and chromium, normally essential for high-temperature turbine blades. Engineers had to develop alternative alloys and accept that the engines would have an operational lifespan of just 25 hours before requiring complete rebuilding. The aircraft that emerged was breathtaking. With a top speed of 540 miles per hour, it was 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Its swept-wing design, necessary to delay the onset of compressibility problems at high speeds, gave it a futuristic appearance that shocked Allied pilots who first encountered it. The Me-262 carried four 30mm cannons in its nose, weapons powerful enough to destroy a bomber with just a few hits. When it entered combat in 1944, Allied pilots reported encounters with an aircraft that seemed to come from another era. It could dive on bomber formations, fire, and escape before escort fighters could react. But Hitler's obsession with retaliation weapons led to one of the war's greatest strategic blunders. When he first saw the Me-262, he demanded it be converted into a bomber rather than used as the fighter interceptor it was designed to be. This decision delayed its deployment by crucial months and compromised its effectiveness. Meanwhile, Germany was also developing another secret weapon that would have a more lasting impact on history, the V-2 rocket. At the secret facility of Peenemünde on the Baltic coast, a team led by Wernher von Braun was building the world's first long-range ballistic missile. The V-2 was a technological marvel and a harbinger of the space age. Standing 46 feet tall and weighing over 27,000 pounds at launch, it was powered by a liquid-fuel rocket engine that burned a mixture of ethanol and liquid oxygen. The engineering challenges were immense. The rocket had to withstand enormous forces during launch, reach speeds over 3,500 miles per hour, climb to the edge of space at altitudes exceeding 50 miles, and then survive re-entry to strike a target nearly 200 miles away. The guidance system used gyroscopes and an analog computer to control the rocket's trajectory. Carbon vanes in the exhaust stream and aerodynamic fins provided steering during the powered ascent. Once the engine cut off, the rocket would follow a ballistic arc to its target. There was no defense against it. The V-2 traveled faster than sound, so it would strike without warning, the explosion arriving before the sound of its approach. Production of the V-2 took place in the Mittelwerk factory, built inside a mountain in the Harz region. Thousands of concentration camp prisoners were worked to death in the tunnels, assembling these weapons under horrific conditions. More people died building the V-2 than were killed by its deployment. As the Allies advanced into Germany in 1945, they discovered these secret weapons facilities and realized they were looking at the future of warfare. American and Soviet intelligence teams raced to capture German scientists, engineers, and as much equipment as they could find. The Americans launched Operation Paperclip, secretly bringing hundreds of German scientists to the United States, including Wernher von Braun and much of his rocket team. The Soviets captured the Mittelwerk factory and remaining equipment, along with German engineers who would help jumpstart their own missile program. These machines and the knowledge behind them would shape the post-war world. The jet engine technology from the Me-262 influenced the development of first-generation American and Soviet jet fighters. The swept-wing design became standard for high-speed aircraft. Within a few years, both superpowers had jet fighters in service, and the age of propeller-driven combat aircraft was effectively over. The V-2 rocket technology had an even more profound impact. Von Braun and his team would go on to develop the rockets that put America's first satellite into orbit and eventually landed men on the moon. The Soviet engineers who studied captured V-2s created their own missiles, leading to the R-7 rocket that launched Sputnik and began the space age. The intercontinental ballistic missiles that defined Cold War strategy were direct descendants of that first V-2. As for Colossus, its story remained secret for decades. After the war, Winston Churchill ordered all the Colossus machines destroyed and all documents about them classified. The pioneering computer scientists who built them were sworn to secrecy and couldn't even mention their wartime work. The secrecy surrounding Colossus meant that its creators received no recognition for years. Tommy Flowers returned to the post office, and his groundbreaking work remained unknown. When the history of computing was written in the 1950s and 60s, American machines like ENIAC were credited as the first electronic computers, even though Colossus had preceded them. It wasn't until the 1970s that the Colossus story began to emerge, and not until 2000 that a rebuilt Colossus was demonstrated to the public at Bletchley Park. The reason for this extreme secrecy was that Britain continued to use the techniques developed for Colossus throughout the Cold War. The mathematical approaches to code breaking and the electronic processing methods remained classified because they were still operationally valuable. The Germans, meanwhile, never knew that their highest-level communications had been compromised. They trusted the Lorenz cipher absolutely, never suspecting that British engineers had built a machine capable of breaking it. This intelligence advantage may have shortened the war in Europe by months, saving countless lives. The secret machines of World War II represented a turning point in human history. They showed that electronic computation was possible, that jet propulsion could revolutionize flight, and that rockets could reach space. These technologies, born in the desperate urgency of total war, would define the latter half of the 20th century. The engineers who created them were working in secret, often under terrible pressure, knowing that failure could mean defeat. They succeeded beyond anything they imagined, creating machines that would change the world in ways that extended far beyond the battlefield. Today, every computer, every jet aircraft, and every spacecraft is a descendant of those secret wartime projects, built by engineers who tried to hide their work from the world but ended up revealing the future.